Oh, this weather. But it does remind me. A few years ago, I had to stay in the West Country. I'm secretary of an organisation that owns extensive land to the north of Dartmoor it is. And I was out surveying our estates when the rain caught me. And I took refuge in an old inn. I remember drinking at the bar, and this old chap said, "Now, you been up from this part. What do you think of that wood up there?" He, I think, had seen me out surveying earlier, and muttered to himself, "It's a Buckland." Well, I looked at the wardrobe. It was made of very stout oak, dark. "Probably 500 years old," I said. "A remarkable piece of work. When this was carved, Shakespeare was a young man." Amazing. Well, will Shakespeare be part of the history of this village? For hundreds of years ago, a ghost hid there, just down there. And he opened the door of the cupboard rapidly and pointed, and in the dark, I don't know what I expected, but I jumped. And I said, "Well, a ghost? What do you mean?" "Some nobleman, he did away with a fancy woman of his, and she haunted him until he confessed and was hung. He's up there on the moor. When the rain stops, if it stops, go and have a visit of me. Up where the crossroads here, there's a small close, Martyn's close they call it." Oh. So he was tried, you know when? Yep, he tried in the reign of the Merry Monarch. By that there judge that got such a very bad reputation in the rebellion. "Do you mean Jeffreys?" "He will not say the name round here. A veritable living monster he be." And there followed a long and somewhat unintelligible account of Jeffreys and what he had done to the West Country, which was curious oral history, but I have to confess my mind wandered. That wardrobe, if it could ever be taken out, would have been worth a bit, and not that mine host would sell it. Well, eventually, after much thunder, the rain lessened enough that I could go up, and as my route took me, as chance would have it, over the wet wild moor, where the four roads crossed, I had a look, and there indeed was a privet hedge, and inside what I could have taken to be a cottage garden, but it was so small, barely 2 meters long, and less than a meter wide. I would have remarked on it if I did not know its history. Well, when I got back to London, I determined just to look it up, see what had happened. And I found, indeed, a nobleman of that part, one Henry Martyn, had stood on trial for his life. Under Jeffreys, and the Attorney General had been the prosecutor, remarkably enough. The account I looked at, which was the court records, merely noted in the margins, and some of the most unusual evidence ever to come before His Majesty was examined, considered, and allowed. Spectral evidence. And there was nothing more. Well, I left it, but a few years later, I was bidding of books, old works. Again, one of the institutes I belong to always looks to expand its library, particularly in the 17th and 18th centuries. The institution was founded in the Enlightenment and likes to preserve those documents. And I saw, amongst the documents, there was a trial of an account of a murderous noble, Henry Martyn, and the prosecutor was indeed the Attorney General, and the judge was indeed Jeffreys. Well, I put in a bid, obviously. And I won, for nobody else was interested in the old manuscript, and I waited with trepidation. But when it came, it was in 17th century shorthand. It might have been written in Chinese, and I had to wait many a year before I could find anyone who could interpret it. But recently, I met one, and I paid them the necessary money. And so I read the story, and can now add to the impartial memories that are held still in the West. Henry Martyn was a squire, a well-to-do man who had been to Cambridge and had recently come back to the country. He was riding backwards and forwards between his parents' estates and various farms that they owned. Well, it was around Christmas time, or so the Attorney General said. And Jeffreys asked, "Is this relevant?" And the Attorney General looked at his lord and said, "It is relevant, my lord, because we need to explain why somebody of such excellent standing would ever have been involved with a woman like Anne Clark." "Is that the murdered party?" "Yes, sire." "May I continue?" "You may." "And so it was," the Attorney General continued, "and so it was that in a shower of rain around Christmas time, he took refuge in a certain inn of good repute just off the moor. And there they were playing a tune. 'Shall I dance? Will you dance with me, madam? Will you dance? Will you dance with me, madam? Will you dance?' And for a moment, it seemed like the Attorney General was going to sing the song. And Jeffreys erupted, 'Why are you singing this? This is no laughing house or public house. What are you doing, man?' 'Sorry,' said the Attorney General. But then all faces turned to the prisoner. And a moment outside there was a strike of thunder. And the prisoner had gone grey. 'What is it? What about the prisoner? Why is he looking like that?' And the jailer asked the prisoner, and the prisoner said, sorry, my lord. It was just this strange, stupid evidence. This is no evidence.' And Jeffreys said, 'Well, it doesn't amount to much yet, but it is up to my good attorney to explain the significance of it, as he has already said. So you be quiet, even as the thunder strikes, and let us hear more.' And the Attorney General carried on to say, 'Well, in this dance there was a certain young innocent woman, by name of Anne Clark, meaning the deceased, who was brought down, not likely to be part of the entertainment, for she was an innocent, and moreover was not comely. But that the squire, perhaps for good humour, danced with her. And they danced to the tune of 'May I sing?' Oh, yes. A full quadrille and more. And that afterwards, every time he passed the inn, which was once a week at least, he would see Anne Clark and sing to her the song. And she would run to greet him, her arms flapping like a goose." "Like a what?" "A goose. Ah, the kind we eat at Christmas. Carry on. Yeah, carry on." "Well, this carried on till April, but in May, the prisoner was betrothed to a woman befitting his status, beautiful and as wealthy as he. And so it was, he cut off all ties with the said Anne Clark, who was, by all accounts, heartbroken, for she had been proud, as she had thought in her own muddy mind, of her suitor, and she would follow him with her arms open, looking with sadness as he rode backwards and forwards. Well, the fiancé of the prisoner, discovering that he was this prearrangement, and moreover that her beloved was the mockery of village taverns, cut off the engagement, and the prisoner was angry with everyone except the person he ought to be angry with, himself. He treated Anne then with great cruelty, all through May, but at the end of May seemed to reconcile with her, because he whispered to her one summer's evening under the yew tree, and the next day she disappeared, and she was not seen again. This is the meat of the subject, no, sire. For although it is certain she was dead soon or after that day, it was not the last time she was seen alive. Do you mean they found her body? No, sire. Although they did find her body, but only because the body had already moved. What a tale is this? This was one you could have served up to frighten your servant maids. Oh, no, sire. It is allowed, is it not? The ghosts may wander of murdered victims. There are precedents. Tell me your tale in full, then. And so it was. They called the first evidence, who was a name Susan, who was the innkeeper. I shall give you her voice as she recounted it, without the tedious questions and endless repetitions. Oh, yes, sire. I remember it very well when the squire first danced with Anne Clark. Around New Year it were, and they were singing, and she was so happy. But I told him, I took him aside and said, don't do it, sire. Don't do it. She's a natural. She's only here because we thought it would be fun for her. Do you not hear the weather tells you? Do not dance with her. But dance he did, and Anne seemed delighted. And I tried to be happy for her. Well, afterwards, I just thought that would be that. It would be just a dance and a pet on the cheek, and they'd be done. But the squire, he's not like that. I don't know that he's a good man or no. But he would come. And when he came, he would sing to Anne. He could have ignored her. And she would run after her, arms flapping like the goose. Oh, we've already heard that. Tell me, was this Anne good and comely? Oh, no, sir, she looked like a puddock full in the face. A puddock, great big staring eyes, huge, great big chin she had. She weren't comely at all. What? I believe, said the Attorney General, a puddock is the country word for a toad. A hot toad. Why didn't she say so? All right. So this toad woman would run after him croaking. Don't put it like that, sire, but yes. Yes, that is true. Well, it went on all spring, it did. And then I remember there was a rumour that the squire was trying to break with Anne, and I saw him hit her once, and I came out and said, what are you doing to our poor Anne? She might be a maid of all works. And he looked so ashamed he crept away. Be that as it may, it was right at the end of May. I remember Anne talking to her under the yew tree. And she seemed so happy, she laughed and giggled and said, he's back, squawking like a duck. But I didn't like it. Well, the next day we looked for her and she was gone. And we carried on looking, and she carried on being gone. So is this the end of the evidence? Oh, no, sire. It was about 2 weeks later, and in another thunderstorm. The weather was atrocious. When the squire came into the inn again, he hadn't been there, not since Anne Clark had disappeared. And I said to him, have you been looking for your sweetheart on the moor then? Meaning to tease him a bit, for although I knew about the engagement, I didn't hold with him, and he was very, very short with me, and told me to hold my tongue and not be so soft, and give him some brandy. And you've been looking for her, aren't you worried that she's disappeared? And the squire shivered and said, she was sure that she would turn up in the end, one way or t'other. He was sure she would. Well, I felt piqued. So, as I poured out the brandy, I sung gently the song he had sung to summon her. Oh, won't you talk? Will you walk with me, madam? Will you walk? Will you talk with me, madam? Will you talk? Will you dance with me? Will you prance with me? Oh, will you walk, madam? Will you walk? And suddenly, outside, squawking fair to burst, although the rain was arcing down, there came the reply, "I will walk with you, I will walk! I will talk with you, I will talk! Oh, I'll dance and I'll prance with thee!" And whose voice was it? Well, that be the voice of Anne Clark. Nobody could interpret it. It sounded like a cockerel or murdered ants. I thought you said she was dead. Oh, yes, sir. She was dead. But just for that moment, I thought she might be coming back. And I ran to the square and said, "Look, your sweetheart is out there. Shall we let her in?" And the squire said, "No, not on your salvation." And he would have left the room, but he couldn't. So he hid behind the bar, and I opened the door. And, well, I had mistaken the weather. A great roll of thunder came in, and a blow of the wind, and all the candles went out, and the fire died. And there was a smell like something that's been too long in a pothole. And I heard a squelch, 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 as if a voice was running, something was running. And then a door slammed. And by then I relit the candle. And I relit all the candles. And the squire came out of his hiding place. And he said, "What was it?" And I said, "I don't know. But it's in here somewhere." And then suddenly, old Tom over there, he pointed. And he pointed to the door of the old cupboard. The cupboard that had been left to me by my great-great-grandfather. Oh, it is. And there was something of brown worked material, stuff, kind that we wear, not to be fitted for a gentleman like yourselves. And she pulled out, the court record said, her cloak, which was indeed made of beaten hemp. Was it the kind of thing, the Attorney General asked at this point, that Anne Clark would wear? Oh, yeah. It could have been her very cloak, all brown it were, but it was wet and ghastly looking. I didn't want to touch it. I know I do normally touch worse things than stuff, but there was just something about it. And when he saw that, the squire ran out into the inclement night, even though the thunder arced. And suddenly, the door of the cupboard opened, and what came out? No doubt a skeleton. No, it weren't a skeleton, sir. Was it a person then? I don't know what it were. I couldn't really see it ran very low, and as it rose, it squawked. It was all stuffed cloak, but at the door it stood and flapped its arms in the way that Anne Clark always did, like a goose, and ran out after him into the night. This evidence takes it in a very strange way. Have you more witnesses for us? 2 more, sir. And the Tom who had been mentioned was called. Now he confirmed all the evidence of the good manner, but he also added one more detail. It would be when she was off getting the brandy, the squire was looking around in his pockets for something, and I said, "I don't suppose you got a knife. I fancy a twist of tobacco, and I ain't got my knife with me and my teeth. They're no good for tobacco. I can't put it out, and it's a twist, see? There's a pipe up there, and I want a twist of tobacco." And the squire, who was looking in his pocket, said, "No, I haven't my knife. I must have left it there." "But it not be here anyway," I said to him. And just then, the hostess, she turned up again and gave me more brandy. Oh, it warmed my soul. And that was the sensible part of his evidence. And finally, the Attorney General called a small shepherd boy. And they asked the small shepherd boy what his job was. "But I be on the moor, I be on the moor, I do a be." But he spoke in such an accent that my lord and the hall could not understand him. So they called in the clergyman to translate him. And he told the story of how the young lad was on the moor, of how he had been offered by the squire a shilling if he found a knife, and a shilling to be going on with if he told nobody he was looking. And he had put the shilling in his pocket, thinking to spend it on Midsummer's Day, the day of the feast of the village. And it was the day before Midsummer. He saw the squire came up. There was a certain pond on the moor. The cattle no longer liked going near. The water seemed bad and brackish, and before it had been the finest water on all the pond, on all the moor, the finest pond on all the moor. Well, the young lad, seeing the squire came up, hid, for the squire was famously bad-tempered. And from his vantage point, he saw him! He going over the pond with a long stick! And the squire hit the water with a stick. And there was a wallowing sound that seemed to come from it. And the squire, hearing that, ran away. At this point, I can't tell you what! The boy became inconsolable. And so the priest had to take him on his knee and talk with him gently and kindly. And the boy said how the water bubbled and moved as the squire ran, and out from it there came a form. He couldn't see what it was, covered as it was in weed and moss, but it stood upon the shore and flapped its two arms and ran, running after the squire. And then further witnesses were called about the oddness of the squire's behaviour, and of how they had indeed, in July the 1st, found a body in that pond, and it was Anne Clark, and her neck had been slit, and the very knife of the squire was still in it. Well, after that, there was not much doubt about his guilt. The jury was duly called to give their vote, their verdict, and at the good judge's bequest, they duly found him guilty. But you know, it was strange, for outside the thunder raged, and inside the courtyard, the courtroom was so dark, and nobody could quite count the number of jury, 12 or 13. The prisoner looked amazed, and he suddenly piped up and said, But sir, you can't hang me on such trivial matters. And Jeffreys looked at him in anger and said, I can hang you if I want to. If you have broken the king's trust and betrayed your people and your country and your caste, I can hang you. But you can't, sir, because I spell my name with a Y, and the indictment spells Martyn with an I, so it's not me. At which point the Attorney General was called, and witnesses indeed confirmed that Martyn could be spelt in the West Country with both I or Y. And so Jeffreys ruled it out. But sire, I haven't had a fair trial. I've been called here ever since I've come to London. There's always been disturbance in my cell. And Jeffreys, being a fair-minded man, had the gaoler brought in, and he had some evidence, but it was ruled hearsay. And then Jeffreys turned to sentence and said, Well, I hope you are disturbed. I hope you are disturbed. I hope Anne Clark is sitting on your head. I hope she's laughing as we hang you. You deserve no peace. You will be taken back to your country and hung upon Holy Innocents' Day. And may she ride with you all the way. And the prisoner, he very fainted with horror. And men remarked how dark the day went. How dark the day went as the sentence was pronounced. And in the short time between the verdict and its enactment, how the prisoner never seemed to be alone in his spirit. Shadows walked everywhere he went, and how at last he screamed with terror as he hung. And so the manuscript breaks off. A remarkable document, I'm sure you will agree. That its writer believed in its truth is beyond doubt. And reading it upon a thundery day, I am not so sure that I would gainsay him. Are you?